There's a call comes ringing o'er the restless waves. Send the light, send the light, send the light, send the light. There are souls to rescue, there are souls to save. Send the light, send the light, send the light, send the light. We will spread the everlasting light with the wind, healing heart in hand, giving God the glory evermore. We will follow His command.
Hello viewers, thank you once again for tuning in. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Wangare. I'm a clinical psychologist by profession. Now we've been having a series talking about mental wellness and spirituality. And in the last episode, we talked about some tips and tools that you can use in order to be able to function as well as to manage yourself. And we paid special attention to what do we do as far as experiencing what we call depression is concerned, managing stress, as well as anger, because there seems to be a lot of issues that a lot of people seem to bring forth as what they are dealing with. Now, maybe before we proceed, I'd like to say that depression is a medical condition, and I would suggest before you diagnose yourself or talk about having a medical condition as depression, it's important that you visit a specialist so that they can be able to diagnose, because we know it's debilitating and it's a serious illness, and it requires experts to be able to help you deal with it. Okay, now for today, in our final episode in this series, I'd like us to talk about guarding our minds. Guarding our minds. Remember, when we introduced this specific series, we started by saying that there are various components to who you are, and the one component that I have been trained in is in the mind and the mental health element, right? And in order for us also to be able to understand how then this mind works, it's important to know that what you think or your way you perceive reality, or how you view issues, or even the way you're able to solve problems and things like that, are as a result of some things that you have learned over the years. And how do we learn? Part of how we learn is going to school. Also, when we go to church, of course, there's some teachings or some information that we are being given, okay? And now, in this era of technology, we know that we have a lot of platforms. We have YouTube, we have WhatsApp, we have Facebook. All these are platforms that are constantly feeding our minds with information. And part of the things that we learn, or some of the information or knowledge that we have acquired through these channels. We know that now, unlike a few years back, we are in an era of information thanks to technology. In the past, for example, if we needed to know what is going on in the country, you required to have either a radio, a television, or buy a newspaper so that you can be informed as far as current affairs is concerned. And even the politicians, if they needed to communicate something to a larger audience, these were the tools that they could use. But in this specific era, we don't have to wait to get to the house to watch the news. We don't have to buy a newspaper. We don't have to listen to the radio, because as long as you have a smartphone, you can be able to access a lot of information. And now you find that, in fact, even a lot of these mainstream media have platforms on a lot of these huge social media tools, right? And so all you just need to do is access their pages and you will get a lot of these current affairs. And not just that, now that we have been connected, okay, I can be able, for example, if I have a relative in Madeira, all I just need to do is ask them about what's going on there, and they can give me on the spot information about what's going on there. If I need to know what is going on in some part of Africa, maybe a country like Togo, all I just need to do is go to one of these social media platforms like Twitter, for example, search for Togo, and I'll get information about Togo. If I want to know what is going on in whatever part of the world, I just need to log on to any social media platform and search, and I'll get access to information. And therefore, then we see that even to learn, while in the past, perhaps how we would access a lot of information is through going to classes. Now, a lot of even universities have created online platforms whereby you can just register with them and you can be able to acquire knowledge or acquire information that maybe in the past would have been difficult. Say, for example, I want to learn a course from one of the biggest universities, or what they call the Ivy Leagues, the Harvards, MIT, Stanford, Cambridge, all these big universities out of the continent of Africa. All I just need to do is just access their platform and register and enroll, and I can get my certification just right here in Kenya. So as far as accessing and getting information is concerned, we are living in an era of information, which means there is a lot of access to knowledge. Okay? And therefore, then the challenges that come with this kind of access to information or access to knowledge is, how are you able to filter, or how are you able to know what information is helpful to you and what is not? What information is true and what is not? How, or is somebody using these platforms to advance their own agenda? Okay? And even if that is the case, is this, or me getting exposed to this information, in my best interest, or is it not? Yeah, and that is why I thought it important, even as we continue to talk about the state of our mental health, to understand that we have to be very critical, and we have to be very cautious of what we allow ourselves to consume. Part of how we interact with reality, part of how we negotiate our everyday challenges, even in these pandemic situations, how we are able to stay afloat is through the kind of information we consume. And the mind is very volatile. And if we don't learn how to filter, okay, or how to discard whatever is not useful to us, then we'll be in trouble. And even from the last week's class, when we talked about some of the things that come up and also interfere with how we relate with each other, the anger, where you feel low, okay, what some people like to talk of, I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling stressed, right? It comes partly as a result of what the information that you're consuming. Okay. Now, I'd like for us to read a couple of scriptures from the Bible, and you see, because this is a Christian channel, and I believe that its main goal is to build us up as Christians, and the reference manual for us is the Bible. So I want, even as we talk about guarding our minds, let's just have some reference from scripture. And I will start with the book of 1 Kings, chapter 11, from verse 1 to 2. This is what it says. But King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. And these were from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. Okay, so that's from the book of 1 Kings, chapter 11, verse 1 and 2. Another scripture I'd like to read from is the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 6, from verse 12. So that's 2 Corinthians chapter 6 from verse 12. You are not restricted by us, but you are restricted by your own affections. Now, in return for the same, I speak as to children. You also be open. Verse 14. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what accord has Christ with Belial? Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? Okay, so that's 2 Corinthians chapter 6. I've read from verse 12 to verse 15. The final scripture that I'd like to read from is the book of 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 13. Okay? And this is what verse 13 says. Therefore, guard up the loins of your mind. Guard up the loins of your mind. Be sober and rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Okay? The topic is in guarding our minds. And from these scriptures, what I wanted to illustrate, starting from the book of Solomon, you see, starts by saying that God had warned the children of Israel from intermarrying with other communities. And can we say that God was tribal or anything like that? You can see one of the reasons why he did that, because we know the story of the children of Israelites. The moment they started going and intermarrying and mixing with other nations around them, what happened is they started to turn away from what they had been instructed. They started to break the law and, go against the instructions that they had been given in order to advance as a people, in order to build their own nations. And why is that? The moment you allow people to come in, or the moment you open your mind to information or outsiders, of course, they have their way of seeing things, they have their way of advancing themselves, of living and things like that. They have their own ideologies, okay? And so, when you open yourself up to their information, of course it will influence you. And I don't think God was telling the children of Israelites to keep to themselves. I think the cautionary piece from why he was telling them this, if you look at it critically, was just suggesting to them, be very careful. What kind of information are you allowing yourself to consume? Because you see, the moment they start mixing with all these nations, they start allowing themselves to participate in things that are against them. Okay? If we look at this verse in the book of Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, where you're told to not be unequally yoked, I mean, for me, I believe it's still building up on the previous chapter we've looked at in the Old Testament, right? When you're being told unequally yoked, what would make you unequally yoked with somebody else? Pretty much, what exactly is your belief system? What are your values? What are your principles? Okay? And what has been taught to you, okay, over a period of time? How has it worked for you? Okay? We are not saying that there's nothing to learn from allowing certain information in. Okay? The question becomes is the person who we are listening to, or the person who we are allowing to speak to us, how is what they're telling us, or how is what we are consuming advancing us? How is it helping us? Okay? How is it working for us? Okay? And you see the danger, what usually ends up happening when you start allowing yourself to open up to certain information or ideology, and especially if you're not critical, okay? Sometimes you find that you're starting to change. You're starting to behave in certain ways, okay? and in ways that do not help you, in ways that are destructive to you, in ways that, of course, are against your best interest. Okay? And you see in the book of 2 Peter, it begins by saying, guard your mind. Guard your mind. And I'm sure there's a lot more. These are not the only scriptures. And even when you study a lot of the themes, you can see that we are exalted to be very, very careful of what we consume. Okay? Everybody is always trying or has some goals that they want to accomplish. Okay? And if we manage to plant or to get a lot of people to start thinking in a certain way, of course, they have their goals and agenda advanced. Okay? And then, so the question becomes, if it's on social media, what is the content or what is the information that you're finding yourself consuming a lot of? Okay? And when you look at your behavior and you look at what information or what content have you been consuming, how much of your behavior can you say is as a result of what you have been consuming? Okay? And also, a lot of thoughts that you have, how many or how much of the thoughts that you have can you say are independent? They've not been influenced by anybody. Okay? We remember in the past, we've heard of the story of that young man who killed his entire family. And he said that why he did that is it was as a result of a certain series that he was consuming. Of course, it's debatable, or we can unpack that to see if it's just that or there's a lot of things that are running in the background, right? But what we find nowadays, you see, for example, even the way people dress, the way people speak. If you go back and ask them how or what influenced, for example, your dress code or your fashion sense, okay? Are you sure this is what you like, or are you putting yourself together because this is something that you have independently come up with, okay? You find that most people will tell you, I follow this trend because this is what is in. How do you know that is what is in? Because of maybe something that you watched. Maybe it's a show you've watched about fashion. So this is the show that has educated you on what is the fashionable to wear. Okay? If you look at even how people talk in certain catchphrases and ask, where did you learn that? You say, no, that's what the youth of today talk. That's how they think. The question is, but how do you know that? And why are you all thinking the same? And if you look at the content that a lot of these people are consuming, you see there's a pattern. So it means a lot of what you're thinking or a lot of how you're behaving, in essence, is as a result of some information or some content that you have consumed. And then the question becomes, is it helping you? Is it helping you advance yourself? Okay? And you see, that's how then you find that a lot of people use these tools to push an agenda. Okay? They use these tools, okay, to condition you to behave in a certain way. Okay? For sometimes even when you ask people, for example, if I was to just tap a little bit into politics, you ask people, for example, who are you likely to vote for? Okay? They will tell you a certain leader. Okay? Then you ask them, why that specific leader? And what are their answers? Well, because they are a good person. Then the next question becomes, and how do you know that? Okay? Then, no, because they have done A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Okay? And how do you know that? You see, they'll maybe say, go to their Facebook page or follow their Twitter. You will see. Okay? But the question becomes, are you sure? Because that's what you read, right? And so how do you know that what has been posted is a reflection of the reality on the ground? Okay? And you find that a lot of people, even the people they follow, the politicians they support, they're not so much supporting because they have arrived at their own conclusion based on a lot of study and research, but because of things that they have been consuming. Okay? And this is one of the reasons then that becomes a challenge with us, is because a lot of us, a lot of the things that we do, a lot of the way that we think, we don't take time to examine, are these our own thoughts? Did we arrive at this way of thinking and seeing the world by ourselves? Or we believe so, or we think this way because of somebody else, teaching us to be that way. Okay? And so this is why it's very, very, very important, very, very important to be very, very critical of what you're consuming, because if you don't question why you think the way you do, or why you believe what you believe, or why you're advancing some ways of being, you become very, very easy to be manipulated. You become very, very easy to be abused. And we have seen a lot of cases where people have taken advantage. People say that there are a lot of these scams and pyramid schemes whereby you're told if you invest money or if you join in this scheme, you will be able to make your money very fast. Let's even talk about one of the issues or one of the problems that is plaguing our youth, which is betting. Okay? These companies have been able to trap so many young people, with the hope that you will become rich or a millionaire. And how does it work? It starts by flashing all these advertisements, telling you or giving you a story of somebody who probably purchased a ticket for maybe 100 shillings and ended up maybe winning $1 million or something like that, right? But what it doesn't tell you is that out of, say, 1,000 people who purchased that ticket for 100, only that one person won, which means they've taken a lot of your money, right? So even if they were to give one person that 1 million, okay, it's not a loss to them. However, because you have been conditioned because of the information they're giving you, they're not giving you the full picture. For this person to win, this one person to win this 1 million, how many people participated and lost? Okay? And the other question becomes, because we know in reality, even when it comes to building wealth and acquiring wealth in the right way, it takes time, okay? But when people come to give you these success stories and tell you how they were able to break even and things like that, there's a lot of information that is left out. So even with that person, for example, who's won that 1 million, we don't know how many people have lost and how much money they have lost, because this person might have just betted the first time that 100 shillings. There could be somebody else who even betted more, because of course our capacity and capabilities are very different. So it could be there's someone who's lost 100,000, 50,000 and that kind of thing. We've heard of cases where students even use their school fees money to bet and they lose, and some even end up committing suicide. You see, these are stories that they don't get as much publicity, right? Other than the ones that are advancing a certain agenda, because these companies, for example, would want to get as many people to participate, because the more people participate and put their money in, you see, the more profits they make. And the truth of the matter is, we don't even know how many people are participating. We don't have those figures. We don't even know how much money they make, because again, per hour, per day, per week, right? We don't have those statistics. So what is flashed to us is just what they want us to know so that we can participate. We know that you can win and they bring for you a success story, yeah? and they tell you you can win if you do this. It could be your lucky day. So they just give you what they need for you to know. And this is why I'm asking of us, okay, the kind of information that we allow our minds to consume, the kind of things we expose our mind to, okay, how much of it, you know, is in our best interest, and how much of it is working against us, how much of it is even taking away from our perception of reality, and as a result having an impact on our mental health. Okay, is it helping us to be healthy people? Is it helping us grow as a people? And therefore it's very, 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 very important, very, very important to be very, very cautious of what you consume. If it's not helping to build you, then it definitely is helping you to destroy yourself, or it's also destroying you. So be very, very careful, for the mind is very sensitive, and if you don't have your mind right, then you're bound to not be able to function well. So with those few remarks, or many remarks, I hope you have learned something in this series of mental health, and I hope that we can get to interact more in future. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.